Welcome to this deep dive. You guys sent over some intense documentation about government experiments, and let me tell you, we are ready to unpack this.
Yeah, this research paper really doesn't hold back.
It's a lot.
It is outlining decades of alleged experiments by Western governments on their own citizens.
Yeah.
All without consent.
Yeah, it's giving major trust no one vibes, you know?
Right.
We're talking radiation, biowarfare, even mind control. It's like a movie marathon of Cold War paranoia, but with real world implications.
It's fascinating how this research connects to that specific historical context, right?
Yeah.
The Cold War was a time of intense secrecy and competition.
Right.
Which, as this document suggests, might have caused, some ethical lines to be blurred, all in the pursuit of, quote, progress, end quote.
Right, yeah, like, hey, the Soviets might be doing it, so we have to do it first.
Exactly.
Except we're talking about, experimenting on your own citizens. Not cool.
Right.
So where do we even begin? This document throws out some wild accusations.
Well, we could start with one of the most well-known, albeit controversial, examples, MKUltra.
Oh, yeah.
The CIA's alleged mind control program.
Oh, wow, yeah. That was in one of the articles you shared. They were using LSD and stuff, right, to try and, control people's minds.
That was the goal, at least on paper. According to this research, MKUltra involved everything from LSD and electroshock therapy to hypnosis, all aimed at, cracking the code of mind control.
Right.
They wanted to see if they could, erase memories, implant new ones, even create programmable assassins, all this stuff.
Hold on, programmable assassins. That's straight out of a spy thriller.
Yeah.
Wait, are we talking about real-life Manchurian candidates here?
Minus the glamorous espionage, perhaps. But
Wait.
But the core idea, is eerily similar. And the ethical implications are huge. Imagine being experimented on without your knowledge or consent.
Right.
Potentially having your memories, your sense of self, manipulated. The document really digs into the story of Dr. Ewan Cameron, a psychiatrist who, with CIA funding, used electroshock therapy and LSD on patients.
Wow.
In an attempt to, quote, depattern and reprogram their personalities.
Okay, that's messed up. Didn't he get in huge trouble for that?
His work sparked outrage, lawsuits. It actually played a pivotal role in shaping modern ethical guidelines for medical research, especially concerning informed consent.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's one small silver lining, I guess, but it's still terrifying to think this kind of stuff was happening with, government support.
Absolutely, and it raises broader questions about oversight, right?
Yeah.
If this research is accurate, then, intelligence agencies were operating with a dangerous level of autonomy.
Right. It makes you wonder what safeguards were even in place back then, and more importantly, what's stopping something like this from happening again?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And it's something we'll keep circling back to as we delve further into these alleged experiments.
Okay, so from mind control, where do we go next? Because this document seems to suggest MKUltra was just the tip of the iceberg.
That's right. This research paper connects these alleged mind control experiments to a broader pattern of unethical medical practices, particularly targeting vulnerable populations. It goes on to detail allegations of radiation experiments.
Okay.
And some of these are shocking, to say the least.
Oh, man, what? Give me the rundown.
Well, you've probably heard of the Nevada nuclear tests, right?
Yeah.
They're infamous now. This research alleges that the government knowingly exposed what they call downwinders, people living near the test sites, to dangerous levels of radiation.
Wait, so not just the, immediate fallout, but long-term exposure too? They knew about the risks and just, did it anyway?
That's what this document claims.
Oh.
And it gets worse. It also mentions cases of, individuals being injected with radioactive materials, again, without their knowledge or consent, all in the name of studying the effects of radiation on the human body.
What? Who would agree to something like that?
That's just it. The research suggests they didn't agree. It alleges that these were often people who were deemed, quote, expendable, end quote, like prisoners, minorities, people in mental institutions.
Hold on, this is giving me serious Tuskegee syphilis study vibes. Where they deliberately withheld treatment from black men to study the progression of the disease, except this is somehow even worse because it involves radiation.
You're picking up on a crucial thread here, right?
Yeah.
This research points to a systemic issue, a blatant disregard for informed consent, and a disturbing willingness to exploit marginalized groups.
It's horrifying. Okay,
Yeah.
Before we go any further down this rabbit hole, just remind me again why this matters. These events happened decades ago, right? Why should we care now?
That's a fair question. First, understanding these past injustices is crucial for preventing them from happening again.
Right.
Second, it raises questions about government transparency and accountability. Were there consequences for these actions? And what safeguards are in place now to prevent similar abuses? These are questions we need answers to.
You're right. Knowledge is power.
Exactly.
And this is some powerful, albeit disturbing knowledge.
So what other skeletons are we unearthing today? This research document seems to have a lot more to say.
Oh, we're just getting started. If you thought radiation experiments were bad, wait till you hear about the alleged biowarfare testing. Biowarfare testing.
Yeah, now we're getting into some really unsettling territory. We're not just talking about, developing these weapons in a lab somewhere, but allegedly testing them on unsuspecting populations.
Okay, hold up. Testing bioweapons on your own citizens, that's crossing a major line, don't you think?
I agree. I'm having some serious ethical red flags popping up here. And for good reason. I mean, the document points to several alleged instances of this.
Oh, really?
And they're deeply troubling.
Yeah.
One that immediately comes to mind is the alleged release of Serratia marcescens in the San Francisco Bay Area back in 1950.
Wait, Serratia what?
Serratia marcescens.
Oh.
It's a bacteria, relatively harmless to most people, which is probably why they chose it. But it can cause infections, particularly in people with compromised immune systems, And the document claims that they sprayed it over the entire city, like as a test to study how a biological agent might disperse in a real-world environment.
So they used a whole city as their lab. Didn't anyone notice?
That's what's so chilling about these allegations. The research suggests this was all done covertly, completely, without the knowledge or consent of the people breathing in this bacteria.
That's messed up. And were there any consequences? Did people get sick?
Well, that's where things get murky. The document alleges that there were a few cases of people developing infections after the spraying, but it was never conclusively linked to the Serratia marcescens release.
So a classic case of plausible deniability, right? Just sweep it under the rug and hope no one notices.
It certainly raises those questions, And this wasn't an isolated incident either. Yeah, the document details other alleged instances of biowarfare testing on U.S. citizens.
Like what? Give me another example. I'm ready.
Well, there's Operation Whitecoat.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of that.
Yeah, have you heard of that one?
Yeah. It rings a bell, but I'm forgetting the details. Refresh my memory.
This one's a bit more out in the open, right?
Okay.
It involved intentionally exposing U.S. service members to various infectious agents, including Rickettsia burnetii, which is the bacteria that causes Q fever.
Wait, so the government was intentionally infecting its soldiers with diseases?
Yeah.
What was the logic there?
Well, according to the document, the goal was kind of twofold. First, they wanted to study the effects of these diseases in a controlled environment and hopefully develop vaccines or treatments. And second, to kind of assess the potential of these agents for use in, biological warfare, I guess. They wanted to know how easily they spread, how severe the symptoms were, how long it took for people to recover, that sort of thing.
Yeah. I guess in a twisted way, I can see the military rationale, but still, to use your soldiers as guinea pigs like that, that's pretty messed up.
It certainly raises ethical concerns, right?
Yeah.
Especially regarding informed consent. The research suggests that while, yes, participants in Operation Whitecoat, they did volunteer for the program.
Okay.
They might not have fully understood the risks involved.
So volunteers, but maybe not fully informed volunteers, right?
Yeah.
That's a fine line.
Exactly. And it highlights the importance of truly informed consent, especially when you're dealing with potentially dangerous research.
This whole deep dive is making me realize how much we take informed consent for granted today. We just assume it's a given, but clearly that wasn't always the case.
You're absolutely right. The ethical landscape of scientific research has evolved significantly, especially in the wake of scandals like these that we're discussing, But this document just serves as a stark reminder of why those safeguards, as basic as they may seem, are so important.
Okay, so we've covered mind control experiments and biowarfare testing. What else does this research dig up? Because knowing my luck, it's probably not going to be sunshine and roses.
You're right about that. This document goes on to allege that some governments engaged in, get this, systematic programs of forced sterilization, often targeting marginalized communities.
Wait, forced sterilization? As in, literally sterilizing people against their will?
That's what the research claims.
It's bone-chilling.
And it alleges these programs were often justified on the grounds of eugenics.
Eugenics.
The belief in, quote, improving the human population through selective breeding.
Hold on, eugenics. That's straight out of a dystopian novel.
Sadly, yes.
You're telling me governments actually did that?
The document points to several examples, and they're all deeply disturbing.
Okay, I'm gonna need some details here. This is heavy stuff.
Yeah.
Who were they targeting, and how did they even get away with it?
Well, the document alleges that many of these programs targeted people deemed unfit to reproduce, often based on like really flimsy or discriminatory criteria.
Okay.
This included people with disabilities, mental illnesses,
Right.
and even those deemed, quote, morally unfit or socially undesirable.
This is giving me chills. It's like they were trying to play God, deciding who gets to have children and who doesn't.
That's precisely the danger of eugenics.
Yeah.
It reduces human beings to mere genetic material, stripping away their autonomy and dignity.
It's awful to think that someone could just decide you're not fit to have kids and then just take that choice away from you.
Absolutely. And it speaks to like a chilling disregard for individual rights and autonomy, right? The document highlights that these programs often took advantage of vulnerable populations.
Right.
People who didn't have the resources or the voice to fight back.
So how did they pull it off? Did they just round people up? And I don't even want to imagine it.
It wasn't always that overt, thankfully. This research suggests that coercion and deception were often used.
Oh, wow.
People were told they needed certain medical procedures, but the true nature of those procedures was hidden from them.
That's even more insidious, to prey on people's trust like that. Makes you wonder how many people were sterilized without even realizing what had happened to them.
That's a question that haunts this entire research document, really.
Yeah.
And it underscores the importance of transparency, informed consent, and a healthy dose of skepticism, especially when it comes to, those in positions of power.
You've said it before, but it bears repeating, knowledge is power.
It really is.
And this deep dive, while incredibly unsettling, has been incredibly eye-opening.
It's been a journey, hasn't it? From the depths of MKUltra and the moral abyss of biowarfare testing to the systemic injustices of forced sterilization programs. I mean, we've confronted some dark chapters in recent history.
Yeah, we sure have, but it's important, right? We can't just bury our heads in the sand and pretend this stuff never happened.
Exactly. And I think that's the point this research is trying to make,
Yeah.
As disturbing as it is, it forces us to confront some uncomfortable truths about power, control, and the potential for abuse.
Right. Yeah.
And it reminds us that these aren't just abstract historical events. They have real, lasting consequences.
So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for someone listening to all of this, besides maybe feeling a little bit paranoid?
I think the takeaway is vigilance,
Yeah.
right? We must remain aware of the potential for government overreach. Even in democratic societies, we need to question, we need to demand transparency,
Yeah.
and we need to hold those in power accountable for their actions.
At the beginning of this deep dive, I was a little skeptical. I mean,
Yeah.
some of these allegations seemed, I don't know, a little out there, like something out of a conspiracy theory.
Right.
But seeing all of this laid out, like the connections, the patterns, it's hard to ignore.
It is, and it highlights the importance of critical thinking, right? We
Yeah.
can't just accept everything we're told, especially when it comes from those in authority.
Right.
We need to evaluate the evidence, consider different perspectives, and be willing to ask uncomfortable questions.
Well said. You've given us a lot to think about. Any final words of wisdom before we wrap things up?
Just this: stay curious, stay informed, and never underestimate the importance of asking why.
Love it. That's a wrap on this deep dive.
It really is.
It's intense,
It has,
informative, and more than a little unsettling.
for sure.
To our listeners, thank you for trusting us with these heavy topics.
Yeah, thank you.
Remember, the pursuit of knowledge is never ending, and sometimes the most important truths are the hardest to face.